You ever get that feeling like walking through downtown? All the energy, the
Yeah.
hustle and bustle.
Yeah,
Well, lately, though, things have been a little different, haven't they?
definitely.
Empty office buildings kind of feel like an urban ghost town now.
Yeah, it's quite a contrast, isn't it? Makes you wonder,
Mm-hmm.
can these spaces be revived? Can they be more than just like relics of the pre-pandemic world?
You know.
That's what we're diving into today. We've
Yeah.
got a whole stack of research on this.
Okay.
And we're going to be focusing on a specific financing tool called CPACE
Okay.
and how it might just hold the key to breathing new life into these struggling assets.
So we have this problem, vacant office buildings,
Right.
and this potential solution, C-PACE financing.
Mm-hmm.
But before we jump into all that,
Yeah.
why is repurposing these buildings such a challenge in the first place?
Right.
I mean, it's not as simple as just turning them into apartments. Right.
You're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
The physical structure itself presents a huge hurdle. Think about those wide open floor plans.
Yeah.
They were designed for cubicles,
Right.
but they don't exactly translate to cozy apartment living.
No.
And then you have things like windows, plumbing, and HVAC systems.
Right.
They're often concentrated on the perimeter, which leaves these large interior spaces that really aren't suitable for residential use.
So it's not just about like aesthetics.
Right.
It's like fundamental design
Exactly.
limitation.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the financial aspect.
Mhm.
Renovating on this scale
Huge.
is incredibly expensive.
It's a huge undertaking, and
Yeah.
property owners are already struggling with existing expenses like property taxes and loan payments. And with these low occupancy rates, that financial burden just gets heavier.
Right.
So securing additional funding for these renovations, it's a real catch-22.
They need the money to attract tenants, but they need tenants to get the money.
Right.
So where does C-PACE fit into all this?
Well, CPACE stands for Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy.
Yeah.
It's a financing mechanism specific to each state
Okay.
that provides funding for projects that enhance energy efficiency
Okay.
and building resilience.
So things like upgrading to more efficient HVAC systems or installing energy-saving windows.
Precisely. And these improvements make the buildings more sustainable, more comfortable for occupants, and ultimately more attractive to tenants.
Okay.
And that can help address these financial challenges we were just discussing.
That's interesting. So it's not just a financial tool.
Yeah.
It's a way to kind of address
Mm-hmm.
the broader issues of sustainability and appeal.
Absolutely.
It ties into the whole ESG movement, right?
It does, yeah. Environmental, social, and governance.
Mm-hmm.
But there's more to that ESG connection than meets the eye.
Okay.
For example, while CPACE promotes energy efficiency, the environmental aspect,
Mm-hmm.
we also need to consider the social implications of these renovations. Are we creating affordable housing?
Yeah.
Or just catering to high-end tenants?
Right.
And then when it comes to governance, how transparent are these projects? Are community voices being heard?
That's a good point. It's not enough to just slap an ESG label on something.
Right.
We need to look at the real-world impact on all fronts.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're starting to see how C-PACE could potentially address some of the challenges with repurposing office buildings.
Mm-hmm.
But how does this financing actually work?
So one of the most attractive features of CPACE is its structure.
Okay.
It's typically set up as non-recourse financing
Okay.
with terms of up to 30 years in most states.
Non-recourse financing, does that mean less risk for the borrower?
Exactly. It means the loan is tied to the property itself, not the individual owner.
Okay.
So if the project doesn't work out for
Right.
whatever reason,
Mm-hmm.
the lender can only recoup their losses through the property, not by pursuing the borrower's personal assets.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's a safer bet for borrowers, especially for these large-scale projects where the stakes are higher
Exactly.
and the longer terms help spread out the costs, making it more manageable.
Much more manageable.
Right.
And that's particularly important now with so many companies encouraging a return to the office.
Yeah.
CPACE could be the key to revitalizing these vacant buildings
Mhm.
and making them more appealing to potential tenants.
So C-PACE sounds promising in theory,
Yeah,
but how's it actually playing out in the real world?
right.
Can you share some examples of where it's been successfully used?
Let me give you an example. From
Okay.
downtown Los Angeles,
So,
there was this office building that underwent a $25 million renovation
wow.
to modernize its common areas and amenities.
Okay.
But unfortunately, this was right before the pandemic hit.
Oh, I can see where this is going.
Yeah, they invested all this money,
Yeah.
and then the
Okay.
pandemic emptied out the offices.
Yeah.
Occupancy plummeted, and the lender eventually took possession of the property.
Right.
And then C-PACE entered the picture.
Mm.
The new owner was able to use C-PACE financing to leverage that $25 million that was already invested in those renovations.
Okay.
And they could amortize the costs over 30 years, so effectively refinancing their debt.
So instead of being burdened by that massive debt, they could focus on attracting new tenants with the spaces that were already modernized.
Exactly. And this ties back to the ESG conversation. By
Right.
promoting energy efficiency and sustainable building practices.
Mm-hmm.
This project not only made financial sense,
Right.
but also aligned with those increasingly important values.
Okay, so that's one example of C-PACE being used for capitalization.
Mm-hmm.
But I know there are other ways it can be applied.
Right.
What about situations where a new owner wants to acquire a struggling office building?
Yeah,
Can C-PACE help with that?
absolutely. We've seen cases in Minneapolis and Milwaukee
Right.
where C-PACE was instrumental in facilitating acquisitions of struggling office buildings.
I'm curious about the mechanics of that.
Mhm.
How does C-PACE actually make an acquisition easier?
Well, think about it from the buyer's perspective.
Okay.
They're looking at a building that needs significant upgrades to attract tenants,
Mm-hmm.
but they also need to secure financing for the acquisition itself.
Right.
C-PACE can address both of these needs.
So it's like a double whammy of financial support.
You could say that it provides an alternative financing option
Okay.
that can lower the overall cost of acquiring the property,
Right.
making it more feasible for a new owner to step in and revitalize the space.
In these specific examples,
Mm-hmm.
how did the new owners use C-PACE to improve the properties?
They took different approaches,
Yeah.
which is interesting. In Minneapolis, they completely renovated a large plaza adjacent to the office building
Right.
using C-PACE funds.
Instead of focusing solely on the building itself,
Mm-hmm.
they invested in the surrounding public space.
Right.
Why did they choose that approach?
They recognized that creating a vibrant and attractive public space would benefit not just the office tenants,
Mm-hmm.
but also the entire neighborhood.
Right.
Creating a sense of community and drawing people to the area.
It's about thinking beyond the individual building
Right.
and seeing the bigger picture
Mm-hmm.
of urban revitalization.
Exactly.
That's a really insightful approach.
Yeah.
What about Milwaukee? Did they do something similar?
In Milwaukee, they focused on tenant improvements.
Oh.
So they used C-PACE to fund upgrades like new fixtures, finishes, customized office layouts.
So things that directly benefit the tenants
Right.
and make the space more appealing,
Mm-hmm.
but those improvements can be costly.
They can be.
Right.
But with C-PACE, those costs are amortized over 30 years,
Okay.
making it much more manageable for both the property owner and the tenants.
It's a win-win.
Mm-hmm.
It allows for higher quality improvements
Right.
without breaking the bank.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've seen how C-PACE can be used for capitalization and acquisitions.
Hmm.
But what about the most dramatic transformation of all? Converting these office behemoths into something entirely new, like residential spaces.
That's where I'll pick up next time C-PACE is indeed being used for these kinds of conversions.
Okay.
And we have a compelling example to share that highlights both the challenges and the incredible potential of this approach.
Okay, great. I look forward to that. So we were talking about the most dramatic transformation of all,
Right.
converting these massive office buildings into something entirely new,
Mm-hmm.
like residential spaces.
Yeah,
It seems like a huge undertaking.
it is.
But you mentioned C-PACE is being used for these conversions.
It is, and we have a fascinating example from St. Paul, Minnesota.
Okay.
A former office building, almost 200,000 square feet,
Wow.
is being converted into around 175 apartments,
Okay.
and C-PACE is playing a key role.
Wow, that's a massive project.
It is.
Can you give us a sense of the scale?
Sure.
How much funding are we talking about?
So they secured a $15.8 million C-PACE loan as part of a total project budget of $72 million.
So C-PACE isn't covering the entire cost,
Right.
but it's a significant portion.
It is a significant portion.
And what are they using the funds for?
Mm-hmm.
Is it mainly structural changes to create the apartments?
It's a combination of things.
Okay.
The C-PACE loan is funding upgrades to the building envelope,
Yeah.
windows, HVAC systems,
Mhm.
but it's also covering things like plumbing, lighting,
Right.
even the pumps for mechanical systems and hot water.
So they're really making the building more energy efficient from the ground up.
Yes.
But these upgrades are a significant investment.
Right.
What's the payback? Will they actually make a difference in terms of energy savings for the residents?
That's a great question, and thankfully we have data to answer that.
Okay.
Based on energy modeling,
Mm-hmm.
these improvements are projected to save over $1 million annually.
Over $1 million a year.
Yes.
That's incredible.
It is.
And what about the payback period? How long until those savings offset the initial investment?
The projected payback period is 13.6 years.
Okay.
So within a little over a decade, they'll have recouped their investment
Okay.
and will be enjoying pure savings from that point on.
That's a powerful testament to the long-term benefits of investing in energy efficiency.
It is.
But are there any potential drawbacks to using CPACE for these conversions? It almost sounds too good to be true.
Well, no financing tool is a perfect solution.
Right.
One thing to consider is the upfront cost associated with obtaining a CPACE loan.
What kind of costs are we talking about?
Things like legal fees,
Okay.
consultant fees for energy audits and project assessments,
Yeah.
and administrative fees from the CPACE program itself.
So it's not just the interest rate on the loan.
Right.
There are other expenses to factor in.
There are.
Okay.
And these upfront costs can vary
Mm-hmm.
based on the complexity of the project
Okay.
and the specific requirements of the CPACE program in each state.
So it's important for property owners to do their homework
Yes,
and understand the full financial picture
absolutely.
before jumping in.
Yes.
Are there any other potential downsides or challenges?
Another factor is the time it takes to secure CPACE financing.
Okay.
The process involves multiple steps,
Mm-hmm.
energy audits, project approvals, legal documentation,
Okay.
and it can take several months to complete.
So it's not a quick fix.
No,
It requires planning and patience.
it does.
And while CPACE is becoming more widely available, it's still relatively new in some areas.
Right.
This can lead to a learning curve for local governments,
Yeah.
lenders,
Absolutely.
and even property owners,
Yes.
which can sometimes add complexity and time to the process.
It can.
It makes sense that there would be growing pains with any new program. But overall, it seems like the benefits of CPACE outweigh these challenges,
I would agree with that.
especially when you consider the broader implications.
Right.
We've been focusing on individual buildings,
Mhm.
but CPACE has the potential to revitalize entire downtown cores.
I agree.
That's a great point. It's not just about saving a single building.
right.
It's about the ripple effect on the entire community.
Exactly.
Can you elaborate on that?
Sure.
What are the broader impacts of CPACE on urban areas?
Well, we've touched on some of them already.
Mm-hmm.
By attracting businesses and creating jobs,
Right.
CPACE contributes to a more vibrant local economy.
And as these areas become more desirable, property values increase,
Right.
leading to higher tax revenues for cities.
Exactly.
That's money that can be reinvested back into public services and infrastructure.
Absolutely. It's a positive feedback loop.
Yeah.
And let's not forget the environmental benefits.
Right.
By promoting energy efficiency and reducing greenhouse gas emissions,
Mhm.
CPACE helps create healthier, more sustainable cities.
It's about addressing the climate crisis while also creating economic opportunities.
Yes.
Now, earlier we were talking about non-recourse financing and how it reduces risk for borrowers. But what exactly does that mean in a real-world scenario?
Yeah.
What happens if a project financed through CPACE fails?
Let's say a developer uses CPACE to convert an office building into apartments.
Okay.
But for whatever reason, the project doesn't succeed. Maybe they can't attract enough tenants,
Okay.
or construction costs exceed projections.
Right.
In this case, the lender can only recoup their losses through the property itself. They
Got it.
can't go after the developer's personal assets.
So it provides a level of protection for borrowers,
Right.
which is especially important for these large-scale complex projects.
It is.
Now, we've been focusing a lot on how CPACE helps property owners and developers, but what about the residents and tenants?
Right.
How do they benefit from these CPACE-funded projects?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Think about that St. Paul conversion we discussed. The energy efficiency upgrades will not only reduce the building's environmental impact, but they'll also lead to lower utility bills for the residents.
So it's not just about saving money for the building owner.
Right.
It's about making housing more affordable for the people who live there.
Exactly.
And those upgrades often translate to a more comfortable living experience as well.
Because they do.
Things like better insulation, more efficient heating and cooling systems.
Right.
Upgraded windows can make a big difference.
It can.
It's about creating a more sustainable and desirable living environment.
Absolutely.
So we've seen examples of CPACE being used for capitalization,
Yeah.
acquisitions, and conversions.
Hmm.
But it seems like there's a common thread running through all these projects.
What do you see as the common thread?
Well, it's not just about renovating buildings or securing financing.
Mm-hmm.
It's about reimagining our urban spaces.
I agree.
It's about creating a more sustainable, vibrant,
Mm-hmm.
and equitable future for our cities.
I think you've hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
CPACE is a tool, but it's the vision and creativity of the people using it that truly drives these transformative projects.
Okay. You know, as we've diving deep into this whole CPACE thing,
Mm-hmm.
it's struck me that it's not just about numbers and spreadsheets.
Yeah.
It's about people.
It is. We're talking about revitalizing communities, creating spaces where people can live, work, and connect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, let's zoom out and think about what this all means for our listeners.
Yeah, right.
Why should they care about CPACE and its potential to kind of reshape our cityscapes?
Well, whether you're a homeowner, a renter, a business owner, or just someone who loves exploring their city,
Right.
CPACE has implications for you.
Because it's about creating more vibrant, more sustainable, and more resilient communities.
Absolutely. It's about attracting new businesses, generating jobs, improving the overall quality of life in our cities.
And let's not forget about the environmental benefits.
Right.
We're talking about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, making our buildings more energy efficient,
Yeah.
and ultimately creating a more sustainable future.
It's about taking a proactive approach to addressing the climate crisis. And CPACE provides a tangible way to do that.
So we've seen how CPACE can breathe new life into vacant office buildings,
Yeah.
transforming them into apartments, community spaces, and so much more. But this is just one piece of the puzzle, isn't it?
CPACE is a powerful tool,
Right.
but it's just one of many innovative approaches that are emerging to address these challenges facing our cities.
This brings us back to that thought-provoking question you posed earlier. Considering the success of CPACE,
Right.
what other creative financing solutions could be applied to address urban challenges and promote sustainable development?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
What if we could create financing mechanisms specifically for affordable housing projects or for revitalizing neglected public spaces?
Right.
What if we could incentivize green infrastructure development or support community-owned renewable energy initiatives?
Those are great ideas.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the need for creative thinking and collaboration to find solutions that work for everyone.
Exactly. It's about bringing together diverse perspectives, engaging communities, and being willing to experiment with new approaches.
And that's really the takeaway from our deep dive today. CPACE is a powerful example of how innovative financing can make a real difference.
It is.
But it's also a reminder that we need to keep pushing the boundaries,
Yeah.
keep exploring new ideas,
Absolutely.
and keep working together to create the cities of the future.
I agree.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of CPACE and urban revitalization.
It was my pleasure.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep imagining the possibilities.